Okay. Um, so I decided I wanted to do a quick video before I retire to bed. I have a very important meeting in the morning, and probably the biggest one to date. But right now, um, I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about um, setting the expectation when dating. And this is a bit by request. I have a friend that is going through. I don't even know if "was" is the correct tense, but uh, is or was going through a situation with a guy that he is currently still dating, and I experienced it myself this weekend, the weekend before last. So I can start with my story because I'm a little more familiar with that one, obviously. And then I'll mention some points about his, but just trying to get an idea of what what you guys might think, and how do you handle these situations. So in my version, I met a guy on Tinder, let's say maybe about a month ago, and we talked a little bit. Met twice. We went to a sushi restaurant the first time we met. And then the previous time it was at a pizza place. So we had the food, and everything seemed to be okay. I guess I didn't, you know, nothing noteworthy. I don't think took place either time. And so I asked him recently if he wanted to hang out again, and the response he gave was very uh, well. He said that he wasn't sure that he wasn't sure that I was into him. And I asked him, what makes you think that? And he was saying, well, you talk a lot about guys that you have been with before, and you've mentioned that you've paid for dates, and you haven't paid for us at all yet. So that makes me feel like maybe we're not, uh, or at least maybe you aren't into me. Okay. So and I'll just say real quickly, in my friend's story, it's a very parallel story, just about how people kind of assume that you'll be a certain way based on it could be things that you say or their own assumptions or what have you, but when those expectations are not met, um, and there's a bit of confusion about what do I do now? How do I handle this? Do I bring it up? And I guess what I would say as a matchmaker is that I don't always think it's fair to assume that because someone did something for someone in the past means that they'll do something the same thing with you. The way I like to think of that is, um, I would call it depositing currency. That's how that's discussed in some circles. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the term, what it means is that basically you are engaging with someone. It's the dating part of it. So you are basically going out on dates. Like you're making yourself rise in the ranks, so to speak. So you spend time and you talk and you learn and you discover and you get to a point where then you understand um, what someone else's experience is. And that may incline you to then do more for them. And so I guess what I'm saying is, in my case, for example, I will pay for a date. I'm not afraid to do that. But I also don't always do it. and certainly don't feel that it is an obligation or a responsibility of mine to do that, period. And so there is I think it's an unfair expectation. Now, I will say this, I'm not exactly sure at what point I would have mentioned that. Not to say that I didn't, but it seems like it's not relevant. And I may have said something, like I may have been making a bigger point or a point about something else, and that came up. So then that was enough for him to say, or for him to feel like that expectation was warranted. Um, in my friend's case, he's dating somebody that has a little more money. And so he does things that are kind of the date, the suitor. He does things a little more extravagantly, which is something that my friend is not necessarily used to. My friend is a little more frugal with his money. And so when he's with someone that kind of does what he wants, without consultation, someone that kind of wants you to come along, like it's one of those, he who has the gold makes the rules. That's the concern on his side. If I'm dating somebody that feels like because they make or have more money, that they should be able to determine the rules for the both of us. And I don't want to be, tethered in that way. So how then do you discuss what dating will look like between the two of you? And I guess I'll just say I think the rule is the same. It's always about communication. You have to talk to people, and you have to raise these concerns and tell them what you think and why, what your experience has been. And it's not so much about bashing or harping on exes or wanting to relive days gone by. It's just that this is part of learning your personality. So, generous people like myself don't want to be taken advantage of. That's always an issue with us. And there are other people who, like my friend, who don't mind that you have what you have and are not looking for handouts, but also don't want to be controlled. That, just because I don't make as much money as you doesn't mean that I'm not experienced, that I don't have opinions about design or fashion or comfort. So if I'm going to live in a house with you and you're buying furniture and you're the one who can afford it, and I guess you get what you want, but won't we have to share this eventually, or not? That's my whole point. That the discussion is probably the best way to go. Some guys, are real good about laying those kinds of things like right out there, so you can see how they feel, what they think when it comes to what they'll spend money on, how much money they have, their expectation as far as you spending money, contributing one way or the other. Because in that same story, in telling me that same story, my friend also mentioned another guy that he went out with, and I guess their date, if you will, they went to IKEA, and they got to the register, and I guess whatever they bought together, I guess they each bought one thing, and the total was $15. And the date was looking at my friend like, well, you gonna pay it? You gonna handle it? And my friend is like, it's $15. Like, are you seriously, arm wrestling about this bill? So I know that spending money is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and in this climate, I get it. Um, there is something that's a little that seems to be a little confusing, um, and obviously we have everyone has their own opinions about things like who should pay and the different criteria that they use to make those bases. Um, Depending on what they're paying for, whether it's dinner or rent or whatever. Um, and obviously, we're not a monolith. So we don't all agree or think that the same method should be used. Um, but I think that this would be one of those things that, I guess I'll say it like this. I do personally believe in a 3 date minimum kind of thing. I think that you should give somebody, 3 strikes more or less to kind of knock themselves out of the competition. But in those 3 dates, you should be finding out the vital things. And I think that some of those things, um, some things, there's an order, so to speak. That there's certainly a let's say a minimum mandatory checklist where there are certain things you want to know. But I would give you 3 dates to find those things out. But some things you would ask on the first date, and other things you would probably wait until the third date before you found out. And I don't think I don't think you should consider it a waste of time or money or whatever, because in 3 dates you shouldn't be being necessarily extravagant with what you're doing. It's just enough to, show consistent interest in somebody and what they're doing and how you two can meld together and the desire to continue that. So that said, I think that maybe spending habits might be actually probably a little earlier on, like maybe first or second. Like they kind of happen. I think, quite honestly, they probably happened right when they should have in my situation and his. I think that it's not a bad thing to want to confront it head on and just ask someone, do you tend to pay? Uh, are you okay with that? And if you're going to be the one who is being paid for, then you should be considerate enough to not try to break the other person. So, you know, get what you want, but like get what you gonna eat. And none of and as I mentioned before, I have heard a few war stories about people going out to dinner with folks and the outrageous demands or whatever they're doing, whatever kind of date. But there's this damsel in distress, buy me, pay for me, you know, attitude that a lot of guys have. But we're not focused on that, and I could do a whole nother video on that. But when it comes to that part, just keep in mind that, no one owes you anything. And you don't get to be paid for because of anything. Because you're younger, because you make less money, because you live further away, because of your sexual position. Like none of that is validation for that. And that's one of those things that I'm going to discuss in a future video about the dynamic that changes between two men, because so many of us use the straight dynamic and trying to fall into male and female and masculine and feminine and active and passive roles in a relationship that don't fit because the expectation is not the same. The dynamic is not the same. So More on that later. But what I will just say, my general advice to you in this realm is to just be considerate, but also talk. If it's a concern, bring it up. And it is the kind of thing that I think should be brought up sooner than later. And then at least you can understand the way the other thinks. One person might, people are spenders and other people are savers. So you just have to find, but some people have the means, and other people don't. So discussions will help with, sorting all of that out. But I do think that that's something you should figure out beforehand, but understand that there should be no expectation of obligation. But anyway, keep that in mind. And for more discussions like this, let me know what you think. You can always go to knqmatchmaking.com, spelled just like it is in the logo, and I'll have more exciting for you. I'm trying to make sure that I make more of these videos, and we're going to be talking about some other stuff, but that was just one that was kind of pressing, and my friend asked me to make it, so that's what I think about that. So I guess what you could of course answer in the comments is, how you handle that. Are you a spender or a saver? And what's your expectation when dating? Do you pay for dates or do you not pay for dates? And if you do, then, is there a certain amount you're only willing to go up under? Or there's something that the guy has to do or prove before you'll pay for a date, or what? So, you can think that over, and we could discuss it. You could also sign up for Kings and Queens on the at our site, knqmatchmaking.com, under the membership tab, and you'll get more videos like this one and dating advice and all that kind of stuff right to your inbox. So hit us up, and we'll see y'all next time.